Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jaden.
And I'm Wesley Bradford.
Welcome to Legally Compromising, where we discuss different issues both in the United States and worldwide. We'll go ahead and go to my good friend here, Mr. Wesley Bradford, on the first two issues, and then we'll go back to me with the other two.
How's it? I mean, it's a great day, Jaden. Really, a lot of good topics we have for our listeners out there today. Really good, up-to-date, hot topics in America and worldwide today. Our first thing is about the execution of Georgia's death row inmate Kelly. I could never learn how to say this name. Gissander?
I believe it is.
Gissander.
Gissander,
yeah. She was executed after several, attempted stays by her attorneys going all the way up to the Supreme Court. Some things, just a little background on Kelly's case. She was convicted in 1998 for allegedly telling her lover to kill her husband, Gregory Owen, her husband, according to a summary provided by Sam Olson, of Georgia's Attorney General. She and him were both convicted of murder. He struck a deal with the prosecuting attorney where he got life in prison without the possibility of parole, while she was convicted by a jury to death. It brought up, not at the time, but now that we're looking back at the case, it brought up a lot of questions onto why she was put to death rather than him, or why weren't they both put to death, or going into why weren't they both given life without parole? Why is she getting the stiffer sentence of both the guilty parties there? So what do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting to the fact that the court system in the United States is supposed to be fair and just, and you can go back 100 years, 200 years, especially to the crime of the century with the Lindbergh baby, where the individual involved with that case, I can't remember his name, but he was executed on false charges because the police were just tired of looking for somebody. Of course, neither of us are we're not legal experts, of course, but it is interesting the fact that both parties were treated differently, and even to the fact that this was in Georgia, which, reading off your paper there, this is the first woman that they've executed since World War II. I find that overall interesting. The death penalty has been an ongoing issue, and I'm very curious to see where it will go. It's always changing throughout history. You're going to have states that want to do it. You're going to have states that don't want to do it. Human rights activists, all those different communities. What I'm curious about, and what I'm going to ask you is, why did, in Georgia, and I've never been to Georgia, but I'm just curious about this, is it just because it's a South state that they have agreed to execute this woman, or is it because the jury, was it a biased jury is the question also?
I don't really think it has nothing to do with the region. Well, let me rephrase that. It is shown that southern regions, right here by Death Penalty Information Center, that the southern region of the United States have the majority of executions nationwide. Number one, I think everybody knows it's pretty much common logic, is Texas. They have the highest executions of any state. Georgia comes in fourth with over 900 executions dating back to early colonial period of, I think, 1734, it said somewhere in my notes. They were really one of the first states in the United States to have executions in the colonial period. Some of them for murders, rapes, robberies, and for helping slaves escape. Their first woman actually was an African-American woman, house cleaner, who killed a white man. She was convicted, found guilty, and sentenced to death by an all-white 12-man jury at the time. Later on, in 2005, the Georgia legislator, denounced that and said she was guilty on the facts of a black lady getting a fair trial in Georgia, let alone. Some things about that is, yes, she was the first woman since World War II to be executed, and from my knowledge of the case is that the jury itself was very, very, not biased, but mixed with ethnicities, male, female. There was no, you can say, clear bias there. It was just the fact that she was given her due process. the case was investigated, I think, by that area very well. And for the time being, not with the amount of technology they have today, the case was very well investigated with, I think, confessions on both parties. She was given her due process. She was convicted by a jury of her peers, and she was sentenced to death by a jury of her peers. Like most people believe that judges are the people who give you the sentences. Well, in this case, to get the death penalty sentence, they have to bring a jury back to vote on whether to send you to death, or they would either say no death but life without parole. Like something like that. But in this case, it has to be a majority, by the way, too, for you to get the death sentence.
Okay.
A majority vote getting the death sentence. So in this case, he struck a deal. Gregory Owen struck a deal with the DA. He kind of, most people say, ratted her out. Pointing the finger at her. The DA gave him a deal, sentenced her to death. Well, didn't sentence her to death, but put death penalty for her. And we find ourselves in this situation today where she was executed on I think it was Tuesday.
This past Tuesday.
This past Tuesday at I think a little bit after 12 a.m.
Okay. The other thing I have a question over. Do you think is this going to turn into because we've had cases where, and I can't remember their names right now, but the Arizona woman who I think it was 47 stab wounds to her boyfriend, shot him, and did a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she got life in prison. Casey Anthony, the other individual who was accused of killing her daughter. I don't remember the charges. I remember watching the live feed of that.
She was charged with capital murder.
Was she?
But she was.
I don't believe she was found guilty.
Yeah, she was. It was a not guilty plea, but not guilty verdict, but I'm trying to think of the terminology. It's where
was it lesser?
No. She was found. She wasn't given any penalty. She was
Okay.
let off free. She was acquitted. There we go.
Okay.
Excuse me. She was acquitted on all charges. And acquittals, if you don't know, acquittals means where the jury doesn't find you majority not guilty, where they're really just kind of stuck there.
Well, she did happen. She was caught on 2 charges, though. They did convict her of lying to police on 2 different occasions.
Obstruction of
Yes.
justice or perjury. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question turns out, even though she has been executed, she is no longer alive. The question turns out, is she going to be another one of those pop culture, or not pop culture, but another one of those national figures to where people are going to turn their hatred? Because after Casey Anthony, especially after she got acquitted, she was the most hated woman in America for a long period of time. And then it came around the Arizona individual who had a very bizarre name. I don't remember it. So do you think that she might end up being the next Casey Anthony?
I don't think so at all. I mean, like I said, this case was tried and she was convicted in 1998. She's been on death row for 18 years. But the big outcry was that she was given, I guess, good references by her fellow inmates. They were saying that she had completely changed. She did good work. She did a lot of spiritual reincarnation in prison. She wasn't even the same lady they said went to prison. She was, I would say, rehabilitated by the system. Something that's the point of going to prison, is to be rehabilitated to a point where you can be safely introduced in society. And from what everybody's saying, that she was not any harm to anybody. She did Christian work inside the prison. She was a model prisoner, never been in solitary, no disciplinary actions. She did her time. And I guess the biggest motion was given. It's like, she's not that person anymore. You're killing a person who isn't capable of doing that crime or anything anymore. She's a new Kelly.
So let me ask you this then: what do you think? Because obviously, and I have CNN pulled up here. Her execution has been postponed twice. They officially had a set date, but called it off in February due to weather. And then the second time, it was postponed after finding quoted cloudy, lethal injection drugs, because I guess there was, and I'm pretty sure this was the case, that they had more. There's been a lot of protests over that kind of execution style.
Yeah.
So, what do you think is the reason why they went on? What convinced the board or the jury to continue on with this execution if she had become a changed individual? If they have heard, did they even hear testimony from these inmates?
Yes, they were put. The testimony from the inmates were added to the new evidence presented to their parole board. See, in Georgia, they have a unique situation here. In most states that have the death penalty, 31 states to be exact, have the death penalty. All stays or all judgments or pardons of executions are by the governor. In Georgia, the governor doesn't have that power. Now, their parole board has the power to either say the execution stayed, the execution goes on, or the prisoner who was on death row could be dropped down to a lesser charge of life in prison. I mean, you get to live, but you're still having your life in prison. Now, they decided after many outcries, a letter from the Pope himself, an archbishop from Georgia gave a letter asking them to find a different way. As we all know, Pope was here last week, and in one of his, masses, he preached against the death penalty, saying there should be harsh judgments, but there should be also shown mercy to these individuals. Now, that's not his words, it's word for word, that's me paraphrasing, but that's what I was getting from his mass, was saying that we can still, murderers are still murderers, they still have to own up to the consequences, but we should also show mercy by not, doing the whole saying eye for an eye situation.
Yeah. And obviously, Pope Francis has become a big news. According to CNN, his representative also sent a letter to Oklahoma's governor asking that governor to commute the death sentence for another individual by the name of Richard Gossip, saying they had one thing in common, that neither of the convicted murderers actually killed the victim. I know we're both not very familiar with this case. I'm just curious to the fact that if there was evidence, if there was a change, which obviously there probably was a change, if you've heard all this outcry, I don't think she would have tried to bribe people of their mercy or whatnot. I don't think, she doesn't, from what I've heard so far, she doesn't seem like a sociopath.
Yeah.
I mean, how exactly is this going to affect the future of America, especially Georgia, when it comes to the death penalty?
I don't think it is at all. And I say this because, like you said, there's no person, Richard Gillespie from Oklahoma, who wasn't exactly the killer, but he was a conspirator. It's like this. And I'm going to use our advisor, Meg Smith, for an example. So, Meg, if you're listening, I love you, but just for example purposes. Let's say this. I give you a gun and tell you, kill Meg. She gave me a bad grade. You kill Meg. Okay. I told you to kill Meg. I didn't exactly kill Meg, but am I still guilty of murder, though?
Yes.
So the thing is, they were still guilty of murder. And by the way, they were given a due process. They were convicted. The evidence pointed at them. They were convicted, tried, and given fair judgment. Now, they didn't exactly pull the trigger, but they were still conspirators. They were still accomplices to the gruesome act of murder. It's like my mom used to say to me when me and my brother got in trouble, Wesley, you didn't do exactly the stealing, but you're the older brother. You were there. You could have stopped it. It was your idea. You're still as guilty, So I don't think this is going to change anything at all. I think it's going to, raise some eyebrows to, these people who are sentenced to death. You think they will get, the death penalty right away? The average death row inmate stays on death row for at least 15 years because of appeals, new entries of evidence. They stay on death row for 15 years. So the case is, in those 15 years, can those people change? Are they still the same murderers they were 15 years ago? In this case, Kelly wasn't. From accounts, she was completely rehabilitated. So, which is really the reason why we have this system, is to rehabilitate, criminals. But even though this is the first case in which Georgia's done this. There was a case in 1980 where I can't think of exactly the man's name, but I read this off the Washington Post. The man, same situation, was given pleas from President Carter, who comes from Georgia, Pope Benedict, numerous state and local representatives saying, do not execute this man. He doesn't deserve the execution. He has been rehabilitated. And the Georgia Parole Board still executed him. So from my thinking is, once you've been on death row in Georgia, you're not getting out of it. You're going to get your execution no matter what anybody says.
Yeah.
Even President Carter from Georgia, President Jimmy Carter from Georgia put a plea in for this man, and they still executed him.
Wow.
So, I mean, like Texas, man, you're going to fry in Georgia.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll definitely see how. And of course, the case is still fresh. Not the case, but the event of her execution is still fresh. So we're going to have to watch this and see if it does.
And real quick, just a quick number on that. This is coming from the Death Penalty Information Center. There was only 56 women on death row as of December 31st, 2014. 2% of the total death row population. 16 women have been executed since 1976. This is how rare this event is of a woman being executed on U.S. soil. Women don't do that. And in Kansas, 0. Our own state. We have a total of 10 people on death row right now. One of them, if you're from our Kansas City area, knows Justin Thurber, the rapist and killer of Jody Sanderholm. He's currently on death row right now. We have 10 people on death row, 0 women. So for a woman to be on death row, and not only be on death row, but to be executed, is something significant in the American criminal justice system.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we'll have to see how if this does end up changing, because obviously that being postponed, and especially getting a letter from perhaps the most popular and widely known pope in the history of the Vatican.
It was sent from Archbishop Carlo Maria Vignegro on the Pope's behalf to commute the sins to that one be better expressed for both justice and mercy, in a quote by him.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Like I said, let's watch how this develops and see if there is any evolution in that.